Hall, 501 Laurel Street, City Council Chambers, Tuesday, December 20th, 2022 at 4 p.m. I have a call to order. Roll call.
Tim Boder,
Hello.
Kara Schaefer,
Yes.
Andrew Scheip,
Here.
Kevin Yeager,
Yes.
Troy Rushmeyer.
Yes. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Play ball.
We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So move, Yeager.
Second voter.
Consent calendar, notice to public, all matters listed are considered routine by the board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the board votes on the motion. Thank you.
Got it. Wait, did we vote on the agenda? We just had the motion.
You're right, we didn't. Any questions, concerns about the agenda? Any additions? That's why we didn't vote. That's why I didn't ask to vote, because I didn't ask if
Some
there's
guy
any
decided to
additions.
do it. Make a.
You just have to trust me. I missed one meeting and all falls apart. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good catch, Andrew. President, good president next
Got
year.
left out.
Wait a second. Dang.
Okay. About approval of, I think we're good to go, aren't we?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar. Yeager. Shape.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? None heard, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same motion. Passes. We are consented to our calendar. All right,
For that $5.
let's start off with the back of the page. Presentations by Musco Lighting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So throughout the last handful of meetings through summer and fall, we've continued to discuss the softball field lighting over at Memorial Park on fields 1 and 2. So we presented a handful of different documents, and some of those are included in your packet here with the budgetary estimate, some of the design details. I believe there's a cost of ownership comparison. The one I handed out is probably a little bit more easier to understand and kind of compare the two. So Scott Pites, thank you, from Musco Lightings here. So I'd like to really open it up to him for a quick presentation on the lighting and how he came up with that design and kind of the standards behind it, and then open it up for questions from the park board to kind of fulfill your information and any other concerns that you had about the budget estimate.
Okay, great. Come on up.
His is on. Oh, got it.
There you go. Can you hear me? All right. As you mentioned, I'm Scott Pites with Musco Lighting. So I am the Minnesota lighting sales rep. So I've been with Musco a little over 15 years. So recently moved to Minnesota and kind of cover the whole state from a lighting standpoint. So anything from sales to sort of project management to kind of consulting and helping with the planning process is sort of my role with Musco Lighting. So initially, I met with Troy at Memorial Park to look at, what potential upgrades we could do and what we'd be looking at, to convert a system from the HID, the existing HID system that is currently out there is a Musco lighting system from the early 1980s. It's one of our original systems that we installed way back in the day when Musco was founded in we started out about 1978, but about the early 80s is when we were actually doing ball field lighting. So that system's been around a while. It's the first technology we had from an HID standpoint. Everything is somewhat of an integral. It's it's a remote ballast, but kind of integral. Everything's at the top of the pole. So if you know, from a maintenance standpoint, everything you have to get to the top to work on it, service it. So when Troy approached me, my engineer and I, we actually went out to the fields, looked at the existing lighting system, which in lighting terms, those fields were initially designed to be a 30-foot candle infield light level, 20-foot candle outfield light level. That is a recreational level of play for softball, softball/baseball, typically from a recreational standpoint. That standard is still in place today. If you were going to light a recreational softball field, those would be the light levels we'd look at. So, of course, the HID technology is something that we no longer manufacture. We still support a lot of HID product out there, but we do not manufacture HID and do not design around that, just due to the nature of the light source itself. The lamps are harder and harder to source. It's a technology that we eventually see in the next few years being completely phased out in the sports lighting industry. So when we looked at that from a LED upgrade standpoint, we looked at the same light levels. Of course, comparing 30/20 design with an older HID system compared to an LED system, it's kind of comparing the yin to the yang, because they're a very there's a big difference in color, temperature, uniformities, so on and so forth that comes with an LED product. The light cutoff is so much greater. The efficiency of the fixture is better. So we looked at that from the same standpoint of getting a 30/20 design onto the ball field there, utilizing an LED light source. So that's where I guess stem from the lighting design that we put together for Memorial Park. That was the basis that we went off of. So that cost estimates and everything is based off of that lighting system. That LED system that we proposed, or we put some budgets together, designs for, would be a must-go light structure system with the LED light source. That light with our system, we offer a full 25-year parts and labor warranty on that system. So when that is installed, not only we're proactively monitoring the system to see if there's any outages from a warranty standpoint, so that we are proactively contacting the end user when there is an issue to say, hey, you have an outage on on the A pole. We're going to send a technician up to take care of it. So that's part of our warranty service. But the 25-year warranty is parts and labor, but it's also light levels. So that light level that we're showing on that field and the design is the same light level that we will guarantee you for 25 years. It's unique. We started doing that with HID back in 2004. We used a technology called smart lamp technology, where we could ramp up the lumen output of an actual HID lamp to maintain light levels. The system you currently have out there is long before that technology was available. So the lifespan of a lamp that's out there currently is anywhere from 2,400 to 3,000 hours. By 3,000 hours, you've lost almost 40% of your light out there. So from a lighting standpoint, when you're comparing the two systems, an HID system, you relamp, you get this nice curve, and it falls off pretty quickly as it ages. You put a new lamp in it, you're back up. LED, that technology, you don't have a lamp that you're working with there, no depreciation in the gas of the lamp itself. That constant illumination, we are guaranteeing that for over the lifespan of 25 years.
I'm going to interrupt you just so I don't lose my thought here.
Yep.
So what happens to the draw on the electrical draw on that lamp when it starts doing this? Does it draw more power?
Yeah, so there is an increase, because when the lamp itself, when the gas starts discharging in the lamp and the arc tube is actually working harder, the driver will drive a little bit harder. It's a small amount, but it is a measurable amount. So it's a measurable amount of power as the lamp starts to depreciate. So as well as your light levels are dropping pretty quickly, so.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all. So, and that is really the nice thing about the LED product is, you know, your fixtures for the wattage that you're getting for an LED are a lot higher lumen output compared to a 1500 watt lamp. In an LED fixture, we run 228 diodes per fixture. And that's that way whether we're using a 400 watt fixture or whether we're using a 1500 watt fixture. We have 228 diodes, and each one of those diodes has its own optic. So if you can picture an HID lamp and a spun aluminum visor, you have one optic. Each individual LED fixture has 228 optics. So from a lighting standpoint, from performance to an off-site spill-in glare, the advantage of LED far trumps HID. From a playability and a performance standpoint, back to the lamps and ballasts and caps and drivers, everything through you know, your current system. You know, as I mentioned, there's ballast, a cap, and a lamp that are maintenance items, I should say. They all eventually have a lifespan. You know, at some point you're going to be replacing, you know, the lamps. You know, the lamps, as I mentioned, at least every 3,000 hours. The ballast, in some cases, you can get multiple cycles out of a ballast. Capacitors kind of the same way, but they're a few maintenance items. With an LED, the diodes are rated in our fixture. Our current rating right now is right around 90,000 hours before the actual diode will lose 10% of its light output. So it's a long time. It's way out there. Depending on, you know, in Minnesota, you know, when you're talking 250 hours average of usage, it's a lot of years for you to reach that 100 or 90,000 hours of depreciation before you drop to that 10% of light loss. And then the componentry in that, the fixture is actually driven by a ballast, or a driver. We remote all of our drivers on the pole 10 foot above grade. So from a maintenance standpoint, when our technicians go out, they don't have to have a boom truck to get out there. They throw up a step ladder, they troubleshoot it from the ground, and move on. The nice thing about, you know, today's technology with drivers is everything is just like your computer. We can plug into it, diagnostics, we know everything that's going on. In most cases, when we have an outage on a field, it's usually a fuse in there. So for fairly simple fix from a maintenance standpoint for us, hence the reason why it's pretty easy for us to warranty something like this for 25 years, because there's not a lot. There's only less than probably a 10% chance that we're going to ever have to go to the top of that pole again. So from a standpoint of maintenance, so.
All done?
Yeah, any other questions in regards to?
Anybody? Go ahead.
A few. So you mentioned, so I think what we're really trying to look at budgeting wise is 25 years, everything's included, but then, right, do we plan to get exactly 25 years? It seems like, right, we can get more, but once it's out of warranty, right, y'all would still, right, come up in maintenance and do maintenance, we just have to pay for it?
Yeah, so I mean, we offer, so this, you know, your existing system out there, we still carry parts for that system. We do a lot of maintenance work. You know, Musco as a company, we have technicians that can do the troubleshooting and repair work. We have a service department, about 300 people. That's service and warranty department. They take care of any sort of issues somebody may have with their lighting system. We're still servicing old lighting systems back from the 80s, as well as our new lighting system. And yeah, it would be something, you know, after 25 years that if there's a driver outage or, you know, something that need to be componentry, it's a driver and a fixture really in the HID, or excuse me, in the LED world. So there's not a lot of other components that would go with it. But yes, of course, we take care of that from a you know, service and parts standpoint. So after that 25 years. So.
Cool. And then you mentioned So 90,000 hours before you lose 10% of the output.
Yeah.
Does the color temperature, the CRI, does that shift as well as it degrades? Or, I mean, that's a really long time.
So, you know, the color temperature or the CRI does not degrade with, you know, until you start hitting your light loss factor, but you're not going to actually lose light loss. And I mean, it's a kind of a combination as the diode fades out. You know, that's, and that's something that's, it's pretty hard at this stage to be super tangible because we started out in the testing world. And the illumination engineering standards only lets us stamp on our fixture however many hours of testing we've done. When we started selling LED fixtures mainstream, and when I say mainstream, outside of professional sporting venues, in your park and rec departments, your high schools, places like that, we were only stamping that fixture for 45,000 hours. And so dating back to 2007, that's how much we've increased, and that's just due to our testing lab. Our lab can constantly cycle, so that number, about every 6 months, we update our cut sheets, and that number just keeps going up. So we haven't really hit to that point where we're like, yeah, we know it quits at that point. That's just the point where the illumination standards has us cut us off, you know, because we've only done so many hours of testing. So, you know, I anticipate that to keep increasing, and you know, diode technology is pretty amazing currently. So the nice thing is, if you can keep with an LED fixture, if you can keep the fixture happy, cool, that diode goes on and on and on. If you can't keep a diode cool, you have a lot of trouble. So hence we got a lot of research and development into the cooling side of the fixture as well to keep that diode. But yeah, and getting back to CRI and color temperature, I'm glad you brought that up because your current system out there now is about 4,000 Kelvin. The color temperature, it renders light at about 65 CRI. Between 60 and 65 CRI, kind of depending on the age of the capacitors. The LED fixture is a color temperature of 5,700 and a CRI of 75. So you're rendering closer to the sun, plus you have a bluer or more whiter light. So the appearance of an LED at the same light level will appear to be quite a bit brighter. To the human eye. You're going to pick it up, and most people are going to tell you, if you went out there and swapped it out, that the light levels were, even if they were equal, they're going to tell you they're twice as much, just due to the perception of the human eye. That bluer light perceives to be a lot brighter than the warmer light. So even if it's testing the same. So yeah.
Cool. Just one last question.
Yeah.
So you've got the plan for fields, both fields, and it looks like the A and the B poles are shared. Is that the case, or is that just me imagining it from kind of seeing the separate sheets?
Yeah, so we have a common pole, so we common between the A and B poles, utilize one structure for both fields. That way, you know, fewer or less poles. The nice thing about the two fields is they are close enough together. We find a lot of times that they end up being about 20 feet too far apart. And then we end up with two poles in there, so it gets to be a bit busy with two poles. It's nice that the fields are close enough together to common up a couple poles. Generally speaking, that, you know, from an installation standpoint, that's two less foundations you have to put in, drill and put in. So there is some savings when there's an opportunity to common up poles like that. So
if we wanted to do one field but not the other, would there be savings when we get to the second field since you've already got the poles?
Yeah,
Or do you still have
so-
to get up there?
So we would, those poles would be built for what we call a bolt-on cross-arm assembly type. And so they would have a flange plate that would be on. So if you're lighting field 1, there'd be a flange plate that faces field 2. That just bolts the cross arm on when you're ready to put the fixtures. So the fixtures would just bolt on, pole harness would go down, and enclosure would go on, and that's all there would be to the constructing of the second field. So the accommodations are nice, and you have the pole prepped and ready for that future. So, and it would be designed, of course, structurally to handle all the loading for those fixtures. So
Cool, thank you. That's it for me.
Go ahead, Kara.
So your maintenance, the 25-year, you said you could do a lot of it from afar, but if you do have to come here, is it a 24-hour service, Monday through Friday, or like what would be the turnaround time, I guess, to get somebody here if Troy couldn't fix it, or however, with the warranty?
So with the warranty, we fairly quick turnaround depending on the needs. If you've got somebody, if you have a game, you find out tonight that the lights aren't working and you need them working tomorrow night for a game, we can turn that around fairly quickly. What we typically do in those instances is we'll hire a local electrical contractor that we work with. We've got a lot of contractors in the area that specifically work on Musco lighting. So I have a contractor in Foley that actually has 3 different boom trucks. He can get to anywhere up to 120 feet. So he's kind of on call if a Musco technician can't get to the work. So we'll just call him up, we'll give him a work order, they'll go do the work. So we can respond fairly quickly, and generally that's the first question our warranty department will ask is, when do you need the lights? So if it's important that the lights are running tomorrow night, we're gonna get them fixed for you. And so we'll figure out who, if we've gotta call multiple contractors to get somebody to look at it, we'll take care of that. So, there's not something to say, we gotta wait so many days to have the lights repaired. We want to make sure that they're up and running and it's reasonable, so that you're not sitting there waiting or you got to delay a game or anything like that. So from that standpoint, and generally speaking, depending on where the outage is on the field, there are certain fixtures on that field that are more crucial than other fixtures. So depending on where the outage falls, if the outage, in per se might be a center fixture on an outfield pole, is not going to be as critical as a fixture on a pole that's lighting, the batter in the home plate. And why I say that, the speed of the ball, of course, when you're lighting the infield, hence the reason why the light levels are higher, it's the speed of the sport. And as the ball, it's the outfield, the speed dissipates. So from a safety standpoint, we look at it from those side of things. So there are certain fixtures that we'd go, yeah, that has to be fixed ASAP because it's going to impact the play. So.
Okay, and then lastly, can Troy or our maintenance team work on this while they're in warranty? Like, is he covered in our warranty if someone else does the work besides you guys?
Yeah, I mean, if there was something if there was a miscellaneous part, let's just say you took a hit and you needed a surge suppressor replaced. It's a plug and play. Pop it out, you put a new one in. And Troy was more than happy to replace that. We'd be more than happy to send him the parts and work with him to get that fixed. So yeah, that's that's something that we have run across before. Typically what we ask of a customer is to look at the fusing for us, just so we know what we need, maybe per se. We provide spare fuses in the cabinets. They're a touch-safe fuse. When you open the cabinet door, it's lit red if the fuse is blown. But we have a lot of customers that don't feel comfortable looking at fuses. So in that case, we just send somebody out there to take care of it. So. But if it's something that there's a comfort level that somebody doesn't mind checking the fuses, we'll always ask that question. But, I mean, we have a lot of folks that say, I don't want to touch it.
So a 5-year-old could basically do it. Huh? I'm kidding. Anyone else? Tim?
Well, we've been basically slapped in the face for this budget for this year, for putting this together for this year, next year. So this is more likely to have to go on, at best, next year's budget. We've been given a $50,000 appointment for Band-Aids on the machines, or on the lights for now. Will most of this pricing be somewhat very close next year, that we can put this back to the board again?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, right now that's just like up and down with the electrical world and things. But, bottom line is, the budgets that we put together, I didn't put a budget together that if electrical panel went up, you guys were gonna be in trouble for either. So, usually when we factor in that budget estimate, we have enough funding in there that, for some reason, if it's really tight, that we can make sure that project doesn't happen. Cause I don't wanna tell you it's gonna be $400,000 and then you come up and say, I got 400,000, I tell you, oh, it's 450 now. Yeah, so, yeah, if it, gets tabled, from that standpoint, it's, and luckily, things are looking a little bit better electrically, starting to taper a little bit, from a costing standpoint, so unless something would just be drastically changed, but, for most of the budgeting that I've done over the last few years, we've been able to figure out a way with myself and electrical contractors to make sure that we can make the project happen, so.
As far as, you were the original installers of the lights that are out there now, the current ones.
Yeah.
And do you still have plenty of bulbs in stock, or we can get to them?
Yeah, we
Or we had a little issue with
we
that
have
last year.
bulbs. So we carry the lamps. They're hard to source, but we have them. So we do have a stockpile of lamps. We have ballasts. We have capacitors. The interesting thing about the capacitors is the manufacturers are on the fence of whether they're no longer going to manufacture that capacitor anymore.
course.
So we have a method around that where we parallel two capacitors together and make that work. So there are parts available to keep the system to get the system up to par. Availability. I also have a few contractors in the area that have stockpile of used parts that they're typically willing to bring along and give somebody if they need them. We do keep some of that stuff just in case. Somebody needs a capacitor right away. A used one's better than nothing at all.
Right.
So we do hang on to some of those parts. And one of the contractors that we use a lot of that's based out of Foley, he does have some of those stock that he hangs on to for.
Wouldn't be a bad idea to give Jesse that phone number, so, because we don't have anybody in town that has a 70-foot boom here.
Okay. Yep.
So now we're sitting with dark lights for a week if we have to, until we find somebody else that can.
Find somebody that can't do it. Yeah,
Okay,
and I can share that information and they're very good about getting out and they know the equipment really well, so they're usually in and out pretty quickly.
Nice.
So.
Kevin, you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick questions. What does the warranty not cover? Is there anything in this warranty that everyone's talking about that is specifically not covered?
So any sort of tornado, lightning, any act of nature, something like that would that we would deem, if the covers are blown off of the enclosures, we
Acts of
usually know
God.
that lightning hit that.
Okay.
I know, I will say this, I've seen it where surge suppressors have been taken out. No, there's no real evidence of anything. It's not a big cost to us, we replace them. If it's evident and if there's been lightning strikes in the area and things like that, tornado comes through, hail does not affect the LED fixture like it did the HID fixture. The HID fixture, especially the spun aluminum visors like are at a Memorial Park, if it gets hail, they're damaged pretty bad. But with the LED fixture, it's a casted aluminum housing. It would take some massive hail to do much of a damage. But yeah, a direct lightning strike, but we use a lot of surge suppression. There's surge suppression in the control cabinets, and then each individual driver cabinet has surge suppression in it. The drivers themselves have surge suppression built into it. So we're seeing fewer and fewer lightning oriented issues, even if it does take a lightning strike. Our precast foundations have an integrated ground rod in them, so they are set up so that entire concrete base has the ground with a plate that sits on the bottom of the earth. The pole is grounded to that, so usually they'll withstand a lightning to ground strike, Now, anything that takes a direct strike's toast, but most ground to lightning strikes, we see very, very few issues. But yeah, that would be some vandalism if somebody decided to come along and smash something up. But usually the things we don't cover is typically something that insurance companies would cover. So everything else,
But labor,
mechanical,
travel, all that's covered.
it's all covered.
Okay,
Yep,
fantastic.
yep.
And
So-
you cited a figure of 250 hours a year. Is that about what you see in average of municipal use ball fields, recreational ball fields?
That's an average.
That's a number you use
Yeah, that's an
commonly?
average we use. So if you see that that number's up, like this new cost of ownership, where I've split up the existing, that's based off of 250 hours of usage. So of course, if your usage goes up, your maintenance costs and your energy goes up. So that cost of ownership or that ownership savings, that number increases. If for some reason you would be paying demand charges, I don't see a lot of demand charges in Minnesota. I do have a few municipalities, Rochester, they pay demand charges, so this number looks a lot different from an overall cost of ownership. So,
Got it.
but that's kind of where we base it. Now, if you told me it was less or more, those numbers slide, but that's on average in Minnesota. So.
Perfect, thank you. I have a question for staff, but no more for our guest here, sir.
Anyone else? Jesse?
Yes, sir. I know the board has discussed retrofitting the lighting on the existing poles, and you and I have had a discussion about the existing heights on those poles at 64. Can you just expand really quick for the board on the ability to do that and how a 64-foot pole works in that situation type of thing, and
Yeah,
any other
so-
considerations?
So the existing pole heights are, from a standpoint of lighting a field, sufficient to get, decent light across the field, and especially with the technology that was not, back in the day, we didn't worry too much about spill and glare. Glare was not an issue. More and more now, we look at spill and glare from an off-field standpoint as much as an on-field standpoint. So when we look at optimal pole heights, and it varies from field size to field size, that's how we determine pole heights. So when we're looking at a pole, for instance, a 70-foot pole, or in this case, a 60-foot pole on a design, where, you're optimally, your aiming angles are steeper, what we'd say. As we drop those pole heights on a wooden structure or something that's a little shorter, if we drop to a 50 or a 70, those aiming angles become shallow. And when they become shallow, then they cast light further. So you create more glare off-site for shorter pole heights. And you said, Jesse, the pole heights out there, the existing are
I
they?
think they're 64, correct?
Yeah, I've never measured them, but yeah, they're all of 64.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the pole heights between the two would not vary a lot from a new design to existing. It's just, we're gonna have a little bit of a change in aiming angle. And as you do go shallower, shorter pole, if you drop from a 70 to a 60, your aiming angles do increase a little bit there from that standpoint, which would create a little bit more glare. From the existing wood poles, if you're looking at a retrofit, something that, I guess, warranty, I think we briefly discussed that. We do scale that warranty back from a retrofit to a 10-year warranty. And that has more to do with just we don't have as much control of the product out there if we're mounting to an existing structure. To put a 25-year warranty on fixtures that are mounted on a wood pole probably be kind of crazy on our end, because we don't know with woods. Wood is one of those creatures that you don't know if that pole's going to last 30 years or you don't know if it's going to last 30 minutes. So that's what we run up to against on wood structures. Another thing to say about the wood structure, we can't guarantee light levels with the wood structure, and the reason being is because when you fasten that cross-arm assembly to a wooden pole, as that wooden pole, depending on the year, this year we had a really dry year, so those poles twist and turn a lot. And it's crazy how much a crossarm will turn in a 6 or 8 months period. And so we have a lot of wood pole systems out there, and if you're putting LED up on there, you're going to find that eventually you're gonna have some dark spots and there's gonna be re-aiming done. So we don't like to guarantee light levels, on a wooden structure just due to the nature of the pole and what we're up against, retrofitting to that sort of structure. So, that's kind of the unfortunate bit about the wooden poles, because, you know, we've used wooden poles for years, with the HID, product. But let's face it, the HID product is not as efficient, but also, it is not as finicky when it comes to aiming. So light is just flooded everywhere. You know, you lose light, it's not as bright, but it's not as critical as an LED system where you're really trying to pinpoint all of your light to the playing surface to make it more efficient. You know, if you start shifting that light, you lose efficiency pretty quickly, so.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Anyone else?
Not for our guests, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
was Very,
Appreciate it. Hey, no problem at all. Thank you.
Very good information. Much appreciated. I'm even PO'd. But anyway, you had a question for staff? Kevin?
Cost of the transformer, roughly, Mr. Dean? Transformer is not included in this, doesn't sound like. So we would need a transformer out there, assuming that's a normal transformer.
I'd have to talk with Holden
Yep.
and what the demand is on it.
So if I understood this correctly, the transformer is not included in the proposal. And a
believe
transformer
it's
is.
not.
Okay, and a transformer is needed, correct?
Do we not have a transformer there?
I just read something in here that the transformer was not included. I was wondering if you determined that we need a new transformer?
No, you do not
Okay.
need a new transformer. We typically put that in there just in case there is an issue with a power company issue. Currently, we don't see any issue with the existing electrical.
Okay.
As far as
There's gotta be one
main
there.
service upgrade.
Oh, I didn't know if we needed a new one. Okay,
So it's, you know, 'cause your current lighting load is actually in KW is gonna reduce. So we're actually putting less, stress on the main electrical service and transformer than we do existing.
okay, got it. I just read that line in there and
Yeah, no, sorry about that. That's
thought that it
some
meant that we needed one, yeah.
We get into some situations with power companies where some stuff has to be swapped out, and that gets to be really hard from a standpoint of when we're not the customer of actually getting a price from the utility for something like that.
understood, thank you.
I had one question for staff too.
Mr.
Yes, go ahead,
Yeager,
Andrew.
really quick, so on that piece of it, I think if we were to bid that project out and we were about to replace them, I think we would probably leverage BPU to take a quick look at it and see what the condition is, if it's beneficial to replace it at that time, or if it's good to go for a long time long.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Andrew?
So he mentioned the contractor in Foley. Is that a contractor we've worked with before? It sounds different than Holden.
You're not holding.
Yeah.
I believe it's Starry Electric out of Foley. That is correct. Yeah, no, we have not worked with him, but, Scott, you know, told me about, this is probably the closest guy in the area that actually owns a lift. If we do decide to, you know, replace the ballast and capacitors that we have up there now, we're gonna have to get up that high. Holden also, can get a lift. This is probably a one-time thing where they go up there and they get everything replaced, probably done in a few days to a week. So then that lift would be here on site. But as far as future bulb replacements, and if we have to replace ballast, if we have to get up to the top of the pole, we're gonna need somebody with the ability, a lift that can get that high.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if we could have Starry Electric do an assessment, because we have, right, some budget from the council now. So to make sure we're spending that in the best way is to have them take a look and see, right, replace this, not that.
We absolutely can. Yep.
I have a question. We had spent 14,000 last year approximately on repairing those lights. Is that correct? I think I seen that in our packet somewhere.
I remember 14,000. I can't remember if that included the
I-
electric
I'm
cost.
pretty sure I read that today, but how much of that is that all bulbs? I mean, have we replaced ballasters and,
No, the bulbs themselves, just a small amount of that. I think most of it was the cost to have the electricians over there.
more labor than anything else?
Yeah, yeah.
So if we run into bigger problems this coming summer,
And we will.
that what we budgeted could be burned up pretty quickly?
Well, what we budgeted was to replace all the capacitors, all the ballasts, and all the bulbs in every one of them fixtures. And maybe Scott could help. I don't know if it's gonna fix the issue, but I think it's gonna go a long ways to preserving them, longer. I mean, what else can go wrong with them, Scott, besides?
What's your opinion on that,
Yeah,
Scott?
if if you can go through and do a relamp ballast and capacitor on those, you're gonna get as long a life out of that, fixture as the lamp is rated for. So, you're gonna bump back up to that, 3,000 hours of usage out of that lamp, and pretty much turn on your all new components. There's not much can go wrong, other than, maybe some internal wiring that might, there may be an issue here or there. Those with the enclosures up at the top, there wouldn't be any pole harness issues that you would run into. So generally speaking, if you can replace lamp, cap, and ballast, that's basically a new retrofit for that fixture. We'll bring it back up to, as close as you can get to that fixture being brand new. Cleaning the lenses and the reflectors in there will go a long ways as well. And that kind of resets you back to zero. Generally, we recommend, doing it what we call a group relamp, and the reason being is because then we know we can get it all back to original light levels from a design standpoint, because we know we're starting back at zero. But a lot of times budgets don't allow for an entire group relamp, but that's a recommendation that we would as a company to get from, so that you're going to get from a performance standpoint, not just getting all the fixtures working, but actually getting the light back to the ground. So, and typically when we do something like that, we will actually test the lighting as well after it's been relamped, to see where you're at. So that way we're kind of pushing the reset button just as you would a oil change in your car and say, yep, we're here, and we're checking the light levels, and yep, everything's sufficient. And in some cases, guys may do a little bit of re-aiming to get a fixture that might have moved over time, and then you're back to where you were. So, it gives you that 3,000 hours of usable life again.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Scott, just a quick follow-up, and then I know the question was
12 years.
posed to me on this one was, is there an ability to replace the old HID, like the bulbs themselves, with an LED while still keeping the ballast and the capacitors and all the other parts of that the same, kind of like replacing an LED bulb at home from the old bulbs type thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't make a lamp that puts out the lumen outputs as you get from a 1500 watt HID. There's not a housing large enough to hold something like that has a driver, because those LED retrofits have the driver actually built into the lamp. So those fixtures like you see, they screw into, sometimes you'll see them in street lighting and things like that. When you get into sports lighting, like these fixtures, for instance, are almost 100,000 lumens. You just don't make
Worst case,
something that
4 hours a day.
outputs that much light
6 years.
from a retrofit standpoint. So we've seen folks where they've taken the lamp out and put one of those in, and their light levels, I mean, they're lucky to get 10% of the light that they had before. So it's unfortunately, you're talking such high wattage and high lumen output fixtures that there's just not a real great option as far as a retrofit screw-in lamp assembly. So, from an overall standpoint, you're better off just redoing the HID and getting the HID back up to scratch than probably spending the money on a $200 or $300
Thank you.
So the money that we're talking about, the work we're talking about doing to hopefully gain us, put a Band-Aid on whatever you're talking about. I apologize because I wasn't here when you guys discussed that. That's not what he's talking about, correct?
Correct. We recently had Holden give us a price of just under 30,000 to essentially replace all the bulbs, ballasts, and capacitors in all the fixtures on fields 1 and 2.
It is what he's talking about.
Is that the same thing as what you're talking about?
Yeah, that would be a complete, changeover, you know.
Okay.
Catching all of the vital components of the fixture.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Happy holidays.
Let's move on to the lighting workshop. Mr. Kramvik?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, at the last Safety and Public Works meeting, we discussed creating a citywide streetlight policy. I think we kind of narrowed down what our street lighting is going to look like. City Council was interested, it's still informing this work group. I also attended the BPU Commission meeting this morning for this very same work group member selection. So this was kind of brought before us in November 16th Planning Commission meeting to form this work group. Essentially one Planning Commission member, one Park Board member, one BPU Commission member to kind of try to formulate an overall color temperature standard policy within the city of Brainerd. So this would be for streetlights, private property lights within the zoning code, as well as city park lights. Now, we just talked about recreational field lighting. That would be exempted from it. We could potentially set a very high number to it, but we could also just exempt it. So this is really selecting one member from the park board to attend a work group meeting. We don't have, a date is to be determined at this time. We'd be looking to do probably one meeting at the beginning of January. This meeting would also be attended by city staff, Jesse Dean as kind of park board and streets, as well as Trent from BPU, and then myself kind of on behalf of the planning zoning side of things. So I guess with this, I'm looking for a recommendation to select one member to this work group, and again, it'd be at some date to be determined, trying to get all these schedules put together at the beginning of January.
Okay. Did I see, Andrew, that you had already volunteered for this?
Yeah, this sounds really cool. Are you super invested in color?
No, I don't know anything about it. I think.
Is there any objection to more than one member, James?
Yeah, as long as there's not a quorum, it's just kind of a thought of one member, but if there was a couple of people that were interested, certainly could do that.
What a weird group we are. I gotta be honest.
Well, Kara, were you interested?
I think it sounds cool, but I don't have anything to bring.
Want
Like,
to
I
shed
just
some light on
learned.
that?
No.
Just kidding.
I'm gonna use that one time.
Yeah,
You
but-
just used it.
Bump, bump, bump.
No.
I think Mr. Miller would probably love to attend that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Are you asking to?
I'd
did you
love
want
to, yeah.
attend?
I'm also, will be raising my hand for the planning commission also, as planning commission will have a member as well.
Oh, I thought you were already on it from planning.
I don't think, is that, that's coming up, or did it already come up?
Nope, so that's on the next planning commission
Yeah.
meeting. So we do have a
gotta pick
BPU
someone.
member, Mike Aglin. He's gonna be representing BPU, and then we got tonight's, and then tomorrow night's planning commission.
You go in for this, and I'll be already be there for, yeah.
So are you still asking to join Andrew?
I'd love to, yeah.
Do you want that kind of a bonus package?
I think that'd be just fine.
Okay.
Have you seen the movie Twins?
We need
Do
to
we-
make a motion?
I think we probably need to make a motion, but I don't know that we do. I mean, these guys are volunteering to join a commission.
They did make a motion at BPU commission level, so I guess that's up to you guys.
They did or didn't?
They did.
Oh,
I'll make a motion that Andrew and Kevin should join the work group for lighting, Brainerd lighting policy.
okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second by Boder.
Any further discussion? None being heard. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Aye. Opposed, same sign. None being heard. Motion carries. Good luck, you guys.
I would, but
All right, awesome. All right, let's move on to approve the Lum Park trees.
Yes, sir,
Agenda
Mr.
item.
Chair. Oh, sorry. So this is just discussion on tree replanting based on a lot of the trees that were lost at Lum Park over the last summer here. And so as part of the budget process, we had 25,000 that was agreed to kind of roll over into 2023. So essentially in 2023, we have about $50,000 in available funds for tree planting within the parks. So we wanted to identify generally a concept to how we want to ask our different landscaping companies on how to provide us some quotes for trees coming up, where we would want some, generally what kind of species and what sizes we would be looking for, so they could appropriately quote us for a number of trees, where and which kinds. So what we're looking for now, and we can, I'm going to have James kind of jump in here too, because we had some discussions about diversification, how to fill in the parks appropriately, and kind of the different types of species that we could look at for installation. So in your packet, you should have a survey of what we had in Lum Park, so you should have at least a little bit of a breakdown, and I think it was done prior to the storms, but generally the proportions be pretty close. So you'll see the majority of species that we have out here. So I'll let James kind of jump in here on some of the species discussions too.
Yes, thank you. So as Jesse had indicated, we had a discussion about this. I gave a lot of thought into this on how we may, try to divide and purchase this based on evergreens, deciduous. And, one of my potential recommendations here would be kind of a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 tree planting policy. Essentially, you'd be splitting the budget in 3 parts. The first part would be for 8-foot B&B evergreen trees. It could be white pine, white spruce, blue spruce in Lum Park, potentially other parks. There's a number of, I think, red pine in that one, but other ones, if it was other parks, it could be red pine as well. 8-foot is really what you want to go for evergreens. For instance, white pines, red pines can certainly be susceptible to deer damage. If you go lower than that, there's concern that they might actually start eating the terminal bud on the top of it. So you go to 8 feet. If there is deer damage, it might be they could eat half of it. It might not look great for a few years, but it'll grow out of it. You start going to 6 feet or lower than that, you start worrying about that deer damage. So it is recommended for the evergreens to be at 8 feet, bald and burlap. The next one would be 1/3 of the tree budget to be 2-inch caliper B&B deciduous trees. This gives you kind of a nice starting size on there. Typically, are faster growing trees, but there's less of a selection typically with bald and burlap trees. So you're looking typically at sugar maples, lindens, sienna glens. Autumn blaze maple is probably the most popular and most readily available. But with that, if you just did all B&Bs, you're really not diversifying your trees. I know even 5 years ago, there was issues with one certain type of maple that kind of died out. Obviously, history of Dutch elm's disease, as well as what we're dealing with emerald ash borer. So typically you want to diversify trees, but this still does get you a nice tree to start in certain areas and to plan around, maybe give you shade a little bit faster. The last third of the trees would potentially be 15-gallon deciduous trees. So here, you're looking at about $1,000 per tree for your 8-foot evergreens and your 2-inch caliper B&Bs. 15-gallon deciduous, you're probably getting 2 trees for that $1,000, if not slightly more. You're also getting to diversify your selection of trees. Examples, some varieties that are, I think, really underrepresented in some of the parks and in the city: river birch, hackberry, Ohio buckeye, serviceberry, ironwood, honey locust, Kentucky coffee tree, mountain ash. So this would be a way to kind of help diversify, but also, if you're looking at the planting budget, you'd potentially go from 50 trees to 66. So it does give you a little bit more trees as well. I guess in my experience, I still have had good luck with winter success with 15-gallon trees as well. You're just starting out at a smaller size. And with that, me and Jesse did look at potentially, splitting it up. Could it all go into Lum Park? It certainly could. As a tree inspector, I also was inspecting some of the parks and kind of working with Troy on that part of it. I know a couple of years ago we took quite a few trees out of Lum Park that were diseased or dead. Also Gregory Park, and then we also had the storm damage from this past year. But if we wanted to split it up between potentially 3 parks, me and Jesse had discussed potentially 40 trees at Lum Park, 16 trees at Gregory Park, and then 10 trees at JC's Park. Potentially at JC's Park, helping shade some of the ball fields, as well as the new play set that went in there to provide shade over time. But still, most of the trees going to Lum Park because of the need. So with that, certainly can open up to any questions. I don't know if there's anything you want to expand on, Jesse.
No, I think the only question I might have for Troy is, you hit ballpark how many we lost this last summer at Lum?
I know the number.
49. So,
A lot of big ones. Yeah. Hard to believe an 8-foot tree costs $1,000. I mean, it just doesn't seem like.
It's hauled in, planted
I
in,
agree,
spaded
but
in.
it's like drive down buy a Christmas tree for 120.
so
You gotta cut the bottom off of that one, but.
just to give you guys a heads up, so the $1,000 we're ballparking is kind of based on a quote that I recently received from Doucette's for the streets. We has asked them for a quote on 2-inch ball and burlap maples and lindens, and they were about $925 a piece, and that included a 1-year warranty with them.
Thank you, guys. Any comments, questions? I don't think so. Anybody? What were we looking to, what's your recommendation on this?
I think what we would like to do is just generally have an idea of how we want to diversify the trees, if we're okay with a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 type of approach to this, and if we want to kind of roughly do the trees in that kind of a split, or if we want to dictate a dollar amount to be used at Lum Park, or if we're going to have every tree planted at Lum Park. I mean, how does the park board really want to see that done?
I think we should take advantage of these winter months. Last we talked, we were gonna put something together at the different parks of, this was after the storms, of where we thought, kind of as a group, we should add some trees, or replace trees. Master planning for Lum Park still not being complete, I think plays a big part in deciding, not only how many trees, but where they should be, depending on what the master plan of that park would be. So instead of just going and planting trees, and then find out, shoot, we planted here, we probably need to take that one out. That's the last thing we want to do, correct? You guys correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some other parks that, like we're talking Memorial, the skating rinks. Do we need some evergreen trees there to help hold ice down the line, just to keep the sun off the rink a little bit? I think same with JC's as far as not only the ball fields, but the skating rink as well. So there are some areas in the parks that I think we would definitely like to see evergreens over deciduous trees, for certain reasons, shade reasons. And I think we could easily spend whatever the budget is on replacing trees. I think it's just a matter of placing them where we're gonna get the most bang for our buck out of them, with the ice rinks, with shade for different sporting events and whatnot. But anyone like to add, or?
Yeah, please, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with the mindset here of, because that's what I'm a little fuzzy on, is exactly where we should put these. I almost feel like as we're working on our parks, we should identify what we for sure want to keep as open space, and then let staff work on the spaces the remaining spaces, all potential places for trees. But I agree, I feel like we do kind of have a need in some areas where we'd really like to get trees as soon as possible, protection of the ice rinks and so forth. I think I'm okay with a 1/3, 1/3 mix, and my personal feeling is I'd be a proponent of the smaller deciduous trees, thinking we get 2 for the price of 1, because this is a long-term game, not a short-term game. So if we got started, we get 2 trees for 1, we could do a little further, but 50 grand in trees, 50 trees is gonna go like that, and, that's gonna go fast, so, I think maybe, the right thing to do might be for us to each independently think about where we wanna put these trees right off the bat and give a little better direction to staff, or vice versa, have staff give us direction, but that's all.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea, because I did hear that from the last meeting that there are some problems with the ice rinks there, and I think this would be certainly a good time to go and take a look at that during the winter time. So potentially before the next park board meeting, I can go out and take a look at spacing and potentially how many evergreens we'd need there, and I think that could definitely be part of the next plan for these trees.
Yeah, because, we love having special meetings, so we could meet any time of the week and,
Every 2 weeks.
and,
No,
but, if we have to, my next question is, do we need to shore this up by a certain time as far as ordering trees during a certain time of the year where we might get a little better deal versus waiting till the middle of spring to order trees? Yes.
Yeah, I guess in my experience, I think contacting companies probably at the beginning of March would be, in my opinion, about the time to do that.
So if we shore this up by in the middle of the winter here, we should be
Still
pretty
okay.
good.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct. And they should be catching up. I know the issue we had with streets was their crews and their stock was dwindling by the time we asked in like September, and they weren't able to get to us in the fall. But they shouldn't have a problem if we're talking about February and reaching out to a few vendors. It shouldn't be a problem.
So would it be ideal then, Mr. Kramvik, to look at some of that stuff with the ice rinks and then come back and, I think with the discussions we've had before, we could pretty easily, together with you guys, say, let's do this by the end of February easily. So, yes.
Yeah, and from what I'm hearing, potentially instead of a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, maybe it becomes half evergreens and then half potted trees, something like that. It sounds like we may need a little bit more evergreens for some of the ice rinks. So I'll take a look at that and see what spacing, might be and where it might be needed.
Perfect.
We also might come across, now that trees are gone, we might realize, like, we actually do need a tree where it was, or something.
Replacement, yeah.
Yeah, we might be like, oh, that, like at Bain Park, I think some of those along the ice rink, along the road there, I don't know if that would affect you guys making ice, but we might realize that by February and be like, oh, shoot, we really need a tree right there or something. So it might be nice to kind of wait and see how those affect our
Unfortunately,
winter.
those are some beautiful cedar trees that we lost there, but,
Really nice.
yeah. Okay. Andrew?
Oh, I just wonder too if we could use some of the ARPA money for additional trees, particularly for Lum. If we're thinking about making the beach, right, a destination, is there an opportunity to say part of that destination is shade and getting some trees in there with that money? That might make
The money that we have allotted for that.
from ARPA instead of the tree budget. So just maybe a note as we look at this, it's not
Sure.
totally
Sure,
limited to just
good
that.
point. Yeah.
was this money already approved by the city council? To double up trees?
Yeah, we get 25,000 a year, and we chose not to do it last year because we couldn't get the trees.
Now we can double
So we
up.
just pushed it into 23.
I think we could have got them, they were just very
Very
limited
limited.
on what kind of trees we could get. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this? Okay, thank you, guys. Let's move on to park garbage maintenance policy. Now we're getting into the thick of
Do it.
things.
Don't do it.
I held off.
Trash.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So at the last park board meeting, the regular park board meeting, there was some discussion wanting to kind of revisit the garbage can policy, kind of how we handle garbage cans. So in this in this, I kind of just quick summarize what we do with garbage cans, again, generally based on weather. We try and keep them out as long as people are really using the parks. As the temperatures kind of dive down, there's not really a set date that we use. It's just more of a, as temperatures change, people stop using the parks as often. Those get pulled. Sometimes we're timing it at the same time as winterizing the buildings. Usually when the park benches go out, that's when the garbages go with them at the same time, since we're having staff do the removals that time. So that's kind of just been the general concept of how we've handled garbages in the past. But like I said, there hasn't been October 1st, they're always going out, or never before October 1st type thing. There's never been a specific date like that. It's just been weather dependent.
Mr. Dean, anyone? Who brought this up anyway?
I did. I brought it up.
Okay.
So, I guess what I want to talk about is just, why wouldn't we have garbage cans all year long? This also kind of rolls into this, like Kevin and all of us discussing having nicer garbage cans, maybe that would actually stand still.
Your mic.
Oh, I need to talk into it. That would actually, be a standing thing in the winter, so it wouldn't be a Waste Partners one that would tip over. But what I'm thinking is just, for instance, what I brought up at that meeting is we were walking our dog. I don't know, the end of October, we didn't have anywhere to put the poop bag. We're like, why are there no garbage cans here anymore? And I know at the other parks, obviously learning that, the ones that have more activity later on in the year, we would have garbage cans at all that. And I know this is silly, but I'm sure there's other people that come across this situation where they're like, I want to throw my garbage away when I'm at the park. So that's where this all came from. So just curious what it looks like, how much more of an issue is it to have a garbage can there year round? Troy, you're looking at me like I'm absolutely crazy.
No, I'm not. I was just wondering which park you were at.
Oh, I was at Buffalo Hills. Sorry, I should have said that. And I realized, we don't always, I don't think it's always plowed all winter, so it'd be more like people walking their dogs, or I don't know if we have events there or not, which actually I know we do have one, the horse one, and they did bring a garbage can, but that's where this whole thing kicked off. So I don't know if all of the parks, or if it was just Buffalo Hills that the garbage cans are removed.
It's the parks that are not in use as far as, like Buffalo Hills, we don't plow that. We did plow for that one special event. Otherwise, that gets basically blocked off. Same thing with JC's. There's really no we keep garbage cans at the parks that are being used during the winter as far as ice rinks and stuff like that. But we take them off the trails, we take them off, they turn into basically snowmobile trails during the winter. And, I
guess just because there wasn't any snow yet, so I don't know if there's a way we can say, let's keep the garbage cans out until we don't have access to them. Because I don't want to have a garbage can. I understand you're not going to have a garbage can at Buffalo Hills all year long, all winter, and people are going to start throwing trash in it, and then I'm going to empty it or so. I understand that we don't have access to empty it. But JC's Park, if we put a rink there, they'll get a garbage can. And I guess I just wanted to bring up this discussion. So if anyone else had any thoughts on this, or if I'm absolutely crazy.
Now, your dog hold your poop.
What? I did carry it home.
we bring, when we do bring them in the fall, I like to get them in before it gets too cold, because we pressure wash them all, inside and out, and we do that outside our shop. And then once we get them nice and clean, they're ready for spring, and we store them over at the baseball field underneath the bleachers. But if you have a certain recommendation where you'd like to see them, we got lots of them, and it wouldn't be the end of the world to, put one out here and there. We just haven't done it in the past.
Mr. Yeager?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm just running this through my mind here. My thinking is if we got trash cans and we put them out, and it's true that they don't get used, they just sit there and we don't have to empty them. they get used and they get filled, that shows us that there is maybe a need and we should maybe think about trash cans. So I'm kind of thinking along the track of let's just make sure we have at least one per park somewhere in the area that people could get to it, exactly for dogs, that kind of thing, and just kind of see what happens for a winter and see if they do get used. If they absolutely do not, then we'll know that going into the next year. But one per park, even in the parks, or especially in the parks that we don't use much or don't get much use, seems to make sense. It obviously makes sense to keep them where our warming houses are, or the parks that have activity. But I see no good reason to just not throw one in every park. But that's just see what happens.
The other part of that is staff labor time to go check them, to plow, to get to them. Yeah, I mean, even to check them. And so I think we have to be careful that we say we want one in every park, because there's probably several parks that, if they're not plowed, are you gonna walk through a park that's not plowed with your dog and we have 4 feet of snow or 3 feet of snow? I mean, I think we have to use some judgment here that now we're telling staff we want a garbage can in every park, at least one, and yet that's still something that has to go be checked and or emptied, and then access gets hard to get to. So are we just putting it on the edge of the park, and then is it then even a park issue, or is it something else? But I think we have to be careful. So I'd hate to come from here and tell staff we want a garbage can at every park, because Mr. Harris, you tell us what you think of this, but is this going to be labor intensive to do this?
We had garbage cans down at Kiwanis one year. We left a couple out by the parking lot. Well, then they'd inevitably get hit by the snow plows and stuff before we could get over there and move them out of the way, because, you know, when the snow plow rolls by, it kind of swings into that lot there. And we did end up getting a lot of, not so much park garbage, but personal garbage in them. So it has been abused in the past as far as that goes. Places like Memorial, we don't plow the parking lots. The baseball field, the other part of Memorial, the big baseball field and stuff, you know, we usually don't plow down the end of that parking lot. There's just a lot of areas we don't go anymore. We just concentrate on the parks that have the warming houses. And there are people that, like you say, go out and walk their dogs, but this is actually the first time it's come up. But yeah, we could do whatever you guys suggest. We are going to have to, you know, we could leave them out there and check them, you know, once a week or whatever. But as like you said, we're going to have to probably plow a path out to them.
And then decide where to put them.
Yeah, that's going to be the important part. I mean, I'm sure we could. I mean, are you thinking of like putting out on the trails too? Like,
No.
No? Okay.
No, I don't even, it honestly doesn't need to be there this winter. I was just like, it's a bummer, and I know this is a weird year, and they were gone by October, the middle of October, and we still were walking with no snow until Thanksgiving. So I know it's a weird year, but maybe it's like if there's no snow, we keep them out longer. That's more of what I'm getting at. We don't need to plow it unless you guys are going to start plowing. I mean, I'm sure people would walk through Buffalo Hills because that's like right on the trail, so they would walk through the park if you did plow it. But I don't expect you to like have to plow and do all that. But just have garbage cans out longer, I guess. That's all I.
It's a guessing game every year. You know,
Yeah.
we try to, because like I said, we want to get them in and pressure wash them before it gets too cold. But you know, it got cold early, and then I thought, well, here it comes, you know. So, but then it warmed back up, and you know, we try to leave them out as long as possible because otherwise, the people will just
throw
put their
on the
garbage.
ground.
So,
Yeah,
So
and we
how
try to
easy-
get them out as early as possible too, you know, when things start thawing out. So.
would it be easy enough to leave a few cans or a can in each park until snow comes?
Yeah.
And then that way you're not having, you know, you don't have half your cans that need to be pressure washed, that you can't
Yeah.
get to store under the bleachers.
Yep.
that.
And I'll do that,
that
I'll
idea.
do that next year for you. I'll leave, and then we'll just grab them whenever, and then
just me.
it's no big deal. It's just the majority of them, we have, I don't know, close to 80 of them. And
Right.
I'd like to get them in and stored before the snow flies.
And it's
So,
just like another perk at our parks. We want people in our parks. So, and we talk about dogs, but also just like if people are having a snack or kids are eating their goldfish or whatever, like throw away the snack bag instead of bringing it into the car
Yep.
if it's there. So it's just another thing that we can offer our community. As silly as it sounds, it's garbage, but yeah.
I'll do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to the Lum Park Road Boat Launch Light.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So we brought this up at the last meeting. I don't know if you had a chance, Troy, I don't remember if you were on that
I wasn't at
discussion.
the last meeting.
So I believe Sub-Chair Yeager mentioned bringing back some kind of cost estimates to take a look at. So talking with Trent from BPU, he was able to kind of provide me a little bit of a map here that kind of shows where he would feed from is at the one structure there, and he would be able to feed from that direction, kind of go over towards the boat launch. And he also included a couple, I'll call it add-ons, if we wanted to illuminate all of the boat launch road, or if it was really just the boat launch that you wanted to illuminate. So we have a few different options here, and we can really mix and match how we'd like to do it. If you want to do all overhead, only one pole, all underground. Obviously, you can see the underground directional drilling costs quite a bit more, but you don't have the overhead lines to have to contend with the trees and stuff like that. But because you're really just putting a pole in the ground and feeding wire, it's a lot cheaper for them to do that. So based on the costs, we're recommending that if we're going to include a light at the boat launch prior to the State Park Road Account project, we're recommending that option one with just the one pole at the boat launch. And maybe down the road, we can look at including additional poles down the road if need be.
Did this come up as a request from public? Or
Yes.
to have a light there?
It was requested of Widseth to explore the idea of a light at that boat launch specifically. So that we wanted to bring that to the park board to have them review if a light was going to get installed at that boat launch, what that would look like. So we felt that if we were going to install one, now would be the time to do it prior to the resurfacing work of that street.
Do the park hours count for that? I mean, you're supposed to be not docking boats after 10 o'clock, right?
I don't think that's enforced. I think they can dock boats all night long.
But I'm just saying, if they're going to dock them a lot now, if it's going to be lit up at night.
Well, plus winter months, I think, then there'd be a light there where people come on and off the lake during the winter months as well.
I believe it'd be photocell controlled, so it would be just anytime that it's past dusk before dawn, it would be on.
So there's not a possibility for this underground line to be installed during the resurfacing of that road? And to be included in that project or not?
We would probably contract this out separately through BPU, not as part of the project.
Yeah.
But we would like them to get, because they're probably gonna have to bring equipment and hauling stuff in and out of there. So just keeping the wear and tear off of the new pavement as much as possible. We felt now was a good time to get in there before the resurfacing.
Does anyone see an issue with master planning as far as an above-ground wire and/or, I don't think underground line for sure, but as far as running with these two different options? Mr. Yeager, you? wanted to
Yeah,
comment?
just a question for staff. does anyone know of any complaints that we've ever received of not having a light down there? This is brought to us by WIDSETH, not by the public, I don't think, as far as I know. Has we ever received any blowback for not having a light down there?
Not that I've heard. I believe this was a conversation that predated me.
Okay. So where I'm going with this is if we've never really had anybody say, God, this is an ongoing problem, we don't have a light down there, and we do have neighbors that are directly across the little bay of water there, that this light will be right in their backyard. Why do we even want a light down there? I'm just not sure I see a motivation to even spend the $900 for a light down there at this point. And if we really need it, if it turned into a big deal down the road, then we can do it underground if we had to. But to me, I'm just not seeing a good reason to buy it to begin with. That's all.
Which was my point to begin with, was
Where'd it come from?
where did it come from? Yeah, but, anyone else?
I'm with Kevin. I mean, why bother? If it's easy enough to put in more resurfacing the parking lot, possibly then, but why spend $1,000 or $5,000 now on something that no one's even considered?
I think the other issue is, I know we've talked about this in several different areas in the past, is what about solar lighting? I mean, we're talking $5,000 to do underground line, you know, at some point, per your comment, if they're complaining that there's not enough light there, do we look at other options at that point? But I guess I kind of feel the same way. If we don't have the public saying, hey, we really should have a light down there. I mean, most vehicles have headlights and
Most
on and off the
boat
lake.
launches are not lit. I mean, some of them are, but there's a ton of
Some
public
are.
lakes that are
So,
not lit.
Government Landing comes to mind that has a light, I believe, or at least it used to on Gull Lake, but you know, I don't know that, how much it's needed, so.
Kevin, you're 100% correct with the neighbors across. It's not, you
It's going
know,
to be right in their backyard.
it's at most a couple hundred yards to their house from there.
And we maybe want to wait anyways until the new lighting team meets anyways to discuss on what those terms are going to be, because maybe they won't even be allowed.
Yeah. And I see where you're coming from. You're thinking, well, if we're gonna do, you know, they're recommending it, if we're gonna do it, let's do it before that comes in, but, I don't have any further comments. If somebody wants to,
You don't
Make a
see,
motion.
you don't see an issue on the planning side from our engineer that's saying this needs to go in, we need the input right now. That's not the case here, right? It's just, they're saying if we wanted one, now would be the time.
Yes, like I said, there was a conversation with WIDSETH that predated me. It's possible that some of those comments are coming to the DNR or to Paul Sandy. I couldn't tell you that for sure right now. But there was a discussion with WIDSETH about the possibility of putting a boat launch light up there. So I was, from that conversation and knowing that that was kind of part of the original discussions on the State Park Road account grant for that road surface, and the same thing with the DNR doing the planking at that boat launch, there was discussions about a light at that location. So just trying to keep that torch going, I guess.
All right, and with that, I'll make a motion to not move forward with putting a new light at the landing at Lum Park.
A second.
motion and a second by Kara. Any further discussion? None being heard, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Director Dean. Next line item is the proposed amphitheater policy.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So this is kind of bringing a summary of the discussions from last week. So Carrie was nice enough to help me out and put together kind of a formal policy that we would publish for the new amphitheater. And I also included kind of a draft application. Now, this is not the application that would be made available. It's more of a format that would be used to set up the Civic Rec website, the online website that people would fill out. So this is generally the questioning that we would ask people. And so, like I said, this is kind of the formal final policy and application, and we're just looking for direction or approval from the park board on, if you think this looks good, this kind of fits what we were discussing at the special meeting, or if we need to make some tweaks.
Did everyone have a chance to look at this over? Okay, any comments, concerns, questions? Andrew?
Is the size of the canopy, I remember that coming up in terms of putting stakes in the ground that might mess with the irrigation. But if we've said you can't put stuff in the ground and you bring a bunch of weights for a 15 by 15 canopy, like, I don't care. I don't know if that was, maybe I forgot our discussion around that, but that was the only thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, I would
As
say
long
it
as
would be anything that you could temporarily weigh down that wouldn't essentially go into the ground, or like you mentioned, some sort of weight system for a larger canopy, as long as it's not so obtrusive that it might put some irrigation lines in jeopardy. I would think most of them are pretty well spread out, even in like a 5-gallon pail. That does spread the weight a little bit, so you probably won't have a problem.
But like the park department 6x6 canopy has little stakes, and I wouldn't want those in, but that size is allowed. So maybe just reiterating that you can't stake a canopy, but go nuts.
How deep are the irrigation lines?
I'd have to double check, but typically they're only like 6 inches to a foot.
Yeah, I don't know what they put them in at, but generally, they're a foot. The heads, of course.
Right. I just bring this up because, for instance, the ball fields, people put canopies up on them all the time, and they have, other than JC's, they have an irrigation system, right?
If you're talking about those little stakes,
Yeah,
I don't even know if those would penetrate the Schedule 40
right.
sprinkler lines anyway, but if you start pounding them, generally it's the bigger tent style
Right.
where they come
Yeah.
in and they've got a hammer. Party time sets them up all the time for these people, and those are accidents waiting to happen as far as those stakes, because electrical lines, those will go through our sprinkler lines and everything. I mean, I like the idea of weighted canopies.
Yeah, unless they drop the weight on the irrigation head.
Well, yeah, it would have to be pretty heavy.
It'll
but-
happen,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just coming at it from, we were very specific about the signs, and even the like step-in signage, which probably would survive, or it wouldn't puncture a sprinkler line. But let's just
So just
be
add
clear.
no stakes. Yeah,
That was my only thing, though.
There's only 12 by 12 allowed anyway,
right.
nothing larger than that, so. So you're not gonna need a very heavy-duty stake to put in a 12 by 12.
I got a couple thoughts when you're ready.
Plastic
Mr.
tent
Chair.
stake's all you're gonna use for that.
But if we're not allowing like H-stake signs, we probably shouldn't allow those stakes, I think is what you're getting at, right? Yeah.
I agree.
I have something. The sandwich boards, I know we talked about that, so does the city own those already? Or are you guys buying a bunch of sandwich boards for people to rent?
I think we were intending to purchase new ones to kind of store at that location.
Okay, so then what about the poster that goes inside the sandwich board? Or like the sign that goes in there? Usually, I mean, I have a sandwich board and I have to like replace the poster, or, if it's like a different event, or is it like a write-on sandwich board?
I think they would just probably fasten or
Tape
tape
it.
their sign
Okay.
to it, I would expect.
Okay. And then the last sentence there, the temporary posts or hangers. Any supplemental signage or banners must be placed on these temporary posts or hangers. So what does that mean?
So probably easy one would be the barricade that we set up at Gregory at that entrance.
Yep.
So that would be considered like a skid mount where you have almost like
Okay.
a T-shaped leg. And then you can put sandbags on them. So that's kind of like a skid mounted. So something temporary like that you could throw some sandbags or weight on it that would hold up an upright sign, but not
Yep.
go into the ground.
Now that you say that, a temporary post makes me think something in the ground.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when it said post.
We have some other signage that, I'll call it like a little circle or something like that that comes into a single post. You can put like a temporary signage or
yeah.
something like that on there. And again, same thing, you can put a sandbag on there or something to weigh it down. So that was kind of what was intended by temporary post.
Mr. Yeager?
Yeah, real quickly here, just one thing that I want to ask about is the park rules. We have some park rules in our other parks that didn't make their way into this list, and I'm just wondering about that separation. Things like can't smoke within a certain distance to the playground, and there are some other rules so I'm wondering if we should put in there that, just a little line that says, our general park rules apply, here are any additional park rules just for this park. That was one thing. And then my other comment was going to be this whole jazz about the 3-2 keg beer and the whole alcohol thing. I feel like we should wait until we get through this planning session that we're working on that's coming up with how we're going to handle booze in the parks, because I don't think it'll be this. I'm not positive, but I don't think it'll be this. It may be something different. So I'm just wondering if we should hold that out for a while.
We went back and forth on that one quite a bit on whether or not to include something. What we ended up going with was, we'll include it for now because that's how the code reads now.
Okay.
And then
That makes sense.
if we change it, we can quick change this policy. It shouldn't be a big deal to change.
Other than that, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for the time and effort putting this together. It's a great starting point, and like I said, we'll use this for a year, and we'll probably have some feedback of what's working, not working. So I like it. Thanks for the time and effort to put it together.
I would just say, if we're not going to allow any canopies, we should start selling some SFP 50 down there. We probably could fund our lights over at the ballpark.
Sorry, I have one more thing about the porta potties or the additional restrooms provided. I don't think we've talked about this, but is there a certain spot that we want to have those placed, or will you guys work with them on that to make sure that they're not going on our brand new grass? Or, is there a spot that we say your additional porta potties go here?
I'll leave that up to you guys.
Okay.
Do you only want them on paved surfaces? I would assume that you wouldn't want them on the turf grass, but
Right, I would think paved services.
I think,
But
I like this as a starting point. I just think we have to keep in mind that this is a park, and we can't have so many restrictions that we can't use the park. I think we have to be careful, we have this new grass, we can't walk on it. And I'm just playing the devil's advocate, is that at some point, we have to look at this as what it is, and that it's a park, and we definitely want it to be used as well. So I think this is a great starting point, but I'm not saying that's where we're going, but I just,
Porta potties.
yeah, I just know those, a lot of events, bigger events will get them, and there's just a lot, if there's a lot of traffic and there's mud and water and everything that comes out of those, and just thinking ahead. But we can wait and see how many people use them, or like rent porta potties, and if it becomes an issue, but
With our bathrooms there, I'll bet you they won't rent them, maybe, but.
yeah.
it would, yeah.
I don't know, it's just on the
It was
contract.
more of a,
Surprised.
if you have a very large event,
Yep.
that you only have one set of bathrooms out there, they might want to bring out more. So it was more of a just in case type of thing. It's not really a requirement that, we put in there that it's recommended. It's kind of the same language out of the street event policy for the city. So we don't necessarily have to have it in there. It was more of a, so we're aware if they're going to have a large event, if they're going to be bringing out extra porta potties, and like you mentioned, we can ask the question of where were you intending to put them?
Right.
You could potentially put them in the egg shape in the middle, but is that a spot that you would want a vendor? If you're going to have a vendor out there, do you put them somewhere else? And it would just be more or less lead into the conversation of where were you planning to put them?
Yeah, just as like another line item of, you ask how many, and then, where, location, idea, or however you word that to make it sound good. Yeah, put it in a parking spot, yeah.
I can fashion a motion here, Mr. Dean, if you can help me with what we gave you for notations.
Yes, sir. So I have adding another statement of no stakes with the 12 by 12 canopy, a statement of that general park rules apply in addition to all these things, and then essentially adding a really a where question to the additional restrooms question on the application.
All right, I'll make
Oh, just, the-
I was gonna cheat. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Oh, dang it. Just the canopies was, to me, any size, as long as it's not staked.
I believe the language came from the, is it the pavilion or the open space application? So we can write that out. It was just, it came from that application.
Oh. Just keep it then. Yeah, sorry. I just ruined Kevin's thing and not changing it. Yep.
The third one, add the, so general park rules.
Now you gotta rethink your motion.
Canopies,
Minor
park
boats.
holes,
The what?
bathroom location.
Oh, yeah, bathroom location. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the application as submitted here with the following notations: to add a no stakes clause to the 12 by 12 canopies, to add a line in there indicating the general park rules apply to this park as well, and to add a question on the application of if porta potties are brought in, where they would be placed. And I so move.
Okay. One more comment. So with this being said, are you gonna bring the next application to the next park board, or are we just saying we're gonna approve it, however it's gonna look?
Yeah, I said, yeah, approve it as is with the following notations added, so that we don't have to come back with a review. That'd be the intention of my motion.
Okay,
Second that motion.
a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And much like you said, next year you can change everything around anyway.
Yeah. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. None being heard, motion carries. Next item, MLT proposed use of remaining LCCMR funds.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So we had some discussions on the remaining LCCMR funds available for the MLT Park project. So the park board wished to have some additional discussions and invite the Riverfront Committee to those discussions as well. So as of the last memo that we had from WSB, we have approximately 549,000 of remaining grant funds available. So the caveat was the expenses for that grant have to fall within the given scope included in the grant application. And I did include that the entire application, but just a few snippet pages of what we submitted as part of that. It's pretty general and generic for what the statement is. So there is some flexibility there, but we do have to fall within there. However, if we want to expand that scope, we can do so. We just have to go through an amendment process, and that does take some time, especially with like a lot of processes through the state. So it would likely be a couple months to get the amendment approved. And then the issue is working with the contractor to source material, because we probably wouldn't be able to do much of that effort until after the amendment was approved. So timing would be an issue if we have to expand the scope. We could definitely do it. We would have to also talk to them about deadline to expend the grant funds. Again, these are things that could potentially be things that we could resolve, but there's no guarantee the state would approve them. So my recommendation would be to stay within the scope of the project and look for ways within the scope to expend some of those funds. But we absolutely can look at exploring an amendment with the state if need be.
Okay. Thank you, Director Dean. Any comments?
I've got some ideas I came up with.
Okay, Mr. Shipe?
Thinking about, right, how can we make it better for education? Adding Wi-Fi, so if a class goes there, they can look up stuff online, their tablets, Chromebooks, whatever. In the same vein, adding more, I guess, kind of what Carl wanted us to add for the history of the river, but more things about the river itself, right? Fish, trees, the geology of the river, kind of education materials like that. I don't remember if there's a water fountain or a bottle filler on the bathroom, but adding that. Anything for kayaks or maintenance, like a wash station after you pull it out of the river. I don't know if that's actually a thing or not. I don't really kayak, so there's that. A bike maintenance station, And then I think we have security cameras there already, but if not, being able to bump those up our priority list.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Yeager?
Yeah, I have some ideas as well. These are just what came to my mind. When we were going through the original conceptual design on this playground, the idea of the fairly primitive playground equipment kind of came up as it would look good, but it's also a great budgetary way to approach the playground area. So what came to mind for me was that playground area and doing some really there's some really super killer playground equipment that would, I think, fit the park and be much long-term, more long-term lasting and less maintenance as well. So I also had the Wi-Fi, the security, art was something that came to mind as well. So there are a lot of parks that have these really cool sculptures, have wind-driven art, have lots of different aspects of how freestanding art could be brought into this design, which I think would be really fun, especially if we were using a local vendor or creator to create some of this art. And those were kind of my ideas outside of our original scope, or I should say embellishing our original. Some of that was in our original scope, just expanding. So that's all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Anyone else?
I have a couple that were also repeats, but I also had the bottle filler, like the water bottle filler. I'd have more trees, and maybe Dave's berms, or those things that he always talks about, but those could be cool. I like the history one I had too, and then I had workout equipment, and what I'm thinking more is like, it could be adult or children, but more focused on adults, and it's similar maybe to the stuff that's at the ARB. If you guys have done the fitness trail there, low maintenance, really there's no maintenance. I mean, actually there's always maintenance, right? But just something like that. So another thing to do. Boot camps maybe you could have there, gyms could maybe, just ideas. That's it.
Just to be clear, we can't save the money for future maintenance.
Right.
Okay. So, did you guys discuss this at your last little meeting?
We just said, it was just brought up.
So really what we need to do is set up meetings to work through this, right? I mean, Don?
I'd love to hear from Don also and his team.
I would too, because for me, looking at this and especially, Director Dean's advice, stay within the scope of the project, I think is key. I think it's a good recommendation. And what are we missing that you guys had in here that we don't have in here now? Yes, absolutely.
Can you turn the mic on?
Don Gorham, representing the Brainerd Riverfront Committee, much better. I think you guys have hit a lot of the ideas. The only thing out of the scope that's worth to keep in mind is we've always talked about, the idea of parks to connect to the river, vistas, and trails. There has been some preliminary work done on looking at a trail that would run from the park up to basically the Dairy Queen. I know that I think about $100,000 was spent on it. So there is been some study on this. Just another thought to at least keep in mind, this might not be the time to approach it, and it's probably outside of the scope since it's outside of the physical boundaries of the park. But I think the idea of a trail should still be considered as a long-term link because, this is always meant, MLT has always been meant to be a starting point, not an ending point, a starting point for engaging the river in as many ways as we possibly can with the community and fulfilling our basic challenge that the City Council gave us back in 2013, which is to connect the neighborhoods of the community to the river. So I think we always have to keep this as an active process and keep looking at that. I think you've hit on a lot of the ideas that that we had in mind. If my friend and I think our friend Carl Samp, if Carl could be here tonight, I know he had a meeting up in Pequot, he'd be talking about art. He was been talking about art since the first committees started to meet in 2014. And so I did have a couple discussions with Lisa Ackerman at the Crossing. They're very interested in it. They think that would be a great way to engage the art community with the project. So I think art, as you guys mentioned, would be terrific. I think the Wi-Fi, that's something I've considered too, that I think that would be a great thing to add to the park for educational benefits and just to make it a terrific park. The history of the river, I think you guys are hitting on a lot of the ideas that we've been talking about all along. So basically, I think you're on the right track. I think the art thing is something that it probably would need to be spun off into its own little, I don't know, I hate to say another committee, but another meeting in the process, and to bring in some leaders to look at how other communities have done this, whether you're setting up a commission or you're setting up a contest where people present ideas, and that could be used at the park. But yeah, I think you guys are on the right track, but those are some of the thoughts I had. So thank you.
I have one question.
Yeah, you bet.
You mentioned the physical boundaries of the park. Does anyone know where that ends?
Yeah, I think it ends obviously in the river on one side. The other side is obviously going to end at the road. On the southern end, that's where I'm not quite so sure. I think the southern end is pretty much, there is going to be a line formed by the road and by the river, and there's going to be a triangle. I don't know if we have it on the map, but I think there is a point where you just can't go any farther because everything narrows. On the north side, it's pretty much at the crest of the hill. I think it's right behind where we have the observation area on the top. I think it's right behind the observation area. So the trail idea that I think there was some talk about this during the project management team too, was about using that area as kind of the trailhead to get started on a trail that would extend. The topography is really challenging as you head north because it gets really steep behind the North Star Apartments. And so the thought would be that it would be a trail that would start like at the observation deck there, and then it would run, at first it would run along the North Star Apartments, kind of run right along that parallel, and then you would try to get it closer to the river when you can. There are certainly so many challenges because you obviously run into railroad property, which is a challenge to work with that. And of course, at the northern terminus, then you would run into the private property. And there is private property along the way that would be a challenge as well. I think I went beyond your original question, but I hope that helped.
Well, no, you didn't, because my thoughts, the connecting part, part of my thought was, and I think I've mentioned this as far as cleaning out down by Kiwanis along the river was, we have this park, and down the road, we have what's the other park?
Rotary.
The Rotary
Yeah.
Park. And to me, that all needs to run together, and then how do we get the north side of this start going the other direction as far as, I look at the platform that we have underneath the bridge where we have all the graffiti and everything that's going on there. Is there a platform that could be made that connects something to keep going along that ridge? But that's my question. Where does this, is there a boundary that says it has to be within this? Because we're talking over $500,000 of money, and, I think all of these things are great, but I don't think they're gonna get us there. And
No.
I think we have to be careful and thoughtful about how we approach this and make sure that we're, one, not adding a lot of maintenance as was discussed, and two, looking long-term of where we can go with this thing. And so I know it's a pun to say, we can meet anytime, but, personally, I think this requires some real
Right now.
thought now and some insight is, where do we go with this thing?
What is the timing, if I may ask, for submittals for our funding? What kind of window are we in to make these decisions, whether they be additions?
There's not really a specific deadline. We just have, I think, June to expend the funds.
We got till June to spend it.
Yep. So again, we can work through the amendment process and potentially ask for an extension on that. That's something that we could discuss with them. The amendment process can be lengthy. I would say it's going to be about a month, if not a month plus. I'm thinking just from the historic water tower and the experiences we've had with amending that through that state agency, it can take quite a while to get through those reviews. So my guess is it would be, and I believe it was in the LCC Mark grant application too, talking about amendments, that those reviews can take a month plus to go through the process. So again, my concern is not necessarily that we can't get through the process. It's by the time that we get through the process, and now we're talking with the contractor, can they source enough material in a timeline appropriate to get the construction done?
I thought we had till 24 on this deal.
That's my understanding.
I'll have to double check it.
I like into 24, towards the end of 24,
That's my understanding.
not in, which still requires, I think, action sooner than later, because we got to figure it out and then get RFQs and get the, get things rolling again, but
The other concern would be use. Depending on what you're doing, would you be able to utilize the park? I would caution against some of the things that we talked about. I think you mentioned the kayak wash bay type of thing, which would require installing a new water line.
Undergrounds are done.
We're potentially kind of wrapped up with a lot of underground. We don't necessarily want to do a lot of disturbance of the ground now. But there are some, above ground installations. I think one thing that was discussed with Paul Sandy was there was concern about the safety of the playground as close as it is to the riverbank. Looking at it before the snow kind of fell, it's about 5 feet from the edge of that playground to the play area to where it drops off. Does a fence or some sort of a barrier, would that be something that they would want to look at as an installation now? Some things that you brought up, the additional trail, having some discussions with Paul and some of the other people on the site about that. The $500,000 would get expended quite quickly through that project, because you're essentially going to be running not only from a grading and clearing aspect, most of that trail would have retaining wall, and that'll grow incredibly expensive and incredibly quick. I highly doubt that we would be able to get from the park to anywhere normal termini, I guess let's call it. You'd probably end up having to dead end it somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure if that would be a really great solution. Having a trail dead end, and I mean, just from a maintenance standpoint, that might be kind of a headache. And then I don't want to assume that there would be nefarious things happening down there on the riverside, but where people aren't watching type of thing.
I know where the money came from, but does anyone in the room know where the money will go if we do not use it?
It'll go right back to the state, right back to the Environmental Trust Fund.
Okay. Correct.
So I think I would like Kevin had just mentioned, that I think we need to get at least a I don't want to pay to do any more engineering at this point. I think we need to get our management team back together and look at this, because I think we owe it to our community to spend this money wisely. I mean, like I said, we're, $550,000. I think we need to really make sure, instead of just trying at our normal park board meetings to say, this is what we're gonna spend, this is what we're gonna do. I think we need to have the insight of what your guys' long-term planning was, and to help guide this direction. So my proposal is that we meet again, even if it's after the first of the year, but re-kick off
The MLT task
the
force.
MLT task force, yes.
Very good. Cool. Well, thank you. Any other questions?
In
Yeah.
the meantime, can we nail down when this money has to be spent?
So, Mr. Chair, if these are kind of the items that are being discussed, what I can do is not only get the deadline on the grant funding and when that needs to be spent, but I can kind of shop some of these items with LCCMR and see which would be eligible. My concern with some of these, like the security cameras, some of those installations, I'm thinking in my head, I believe the amplified sound was something that was discussed, and if I remember the conversation correctly, it was that would not be an eligible expense. So I'm not sure if the Wi-Fi security cameras installation would be. It's possible that they are. I just have to clarify on
How
that.
about a boom truck? Would a boom truck?
Yeah.
We could put the emblem of the park on the side of
Kids
it.
out of the river if they fall
We
off
could
the
paint the
playground.
emblem of the side of, you could paint the park emblem on the side of it.
Would there be any interest in potentially putting walls on either the learning center or amphitheater structures?
Don, did we lose I'm sorry, Director Dean. Wasn't the original plan, your guys' original plan, to have 2 overlooks?
Well, yes, it was 2 overlooks, and, you know.
And we left one of those out,
I
correct?
think we did, yeah. I think so. I think it would be helpful to kind of go back to some of the original plans and where the project management team
That's-
started.
Yes.
Very
that's
helpful.
my thought.
Good.
Okay.
Project management team, if you're listening,
Put the light on, Kevin.
fill the canteen.
Uh-huh.
They're getting ready to be called back in.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll take care of shopping that out with LCSMR and see kind of generally what some of these would be as eligible or not eligible as the grant currently stands without doing an amendment. And then would the additional PMT meeting be at the next regular park board meeting, or would we be talking a special?
We were meeting evenings. It was fairly, it
Was
was
it
so
a
you could get
Tuesday,
off
like at
6:30?
5:30
Yeah,
or
that's what I was
something?
thinking.
Yeah, that would work for me.
Yeah.
Was it like all 3 of you guys? So then like, can I just come for fun?
We have quorum issues. We'd have to be careful with quorum stuff, but other than
Yeah.
that.
You guys have to be careful on the quorum, but I think the other riverfront members would love to participate as well.
We can schedule it as a special park board meeting. That shouldn't be a problem. It's just a matter of notifications. So similar to our master planning,
So
we can send
that's
out
what-
notification.
I'm
for
wondering,
that.
do we have time to wait until our next park board meeting? If you can bring some of that information back, along with when the deadline is that this money has to be spent, and can we set this up at that point? At our next park board meeting, set up when we're gonna meet?
Works for me.
Sounds good.
I think we should avoid heavy construction, so, in our new park, so.
Yeah.
Was there specific play equipment you had picked
I
out?
do, I'll bring it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess.
Very good.
50 grand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Okay, I don't think we need a motion for that. Correct?
I believe that's correct, sir.
All right.
How big of an obstacle is that path gonna be going by the Dairy Queen?
It's gigantic. That's assuming you get all the approvals.
That's like, I mean, the private owners, I mean, how are they gonna be?
Means you guys have to go back to work and get another grant.
I can virtually guarantee that the problem will be railroad.
Yeah.
And by problem, I mean insurmountable.
Yeah.
But I'm an optimist. No, I'm not. I'm actually not an optimist. You do the optimist part, I'll do the other part.
Okay. Let's move on to approve the guardrail change at Tamarack Street and South Seventh.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So originally I was going to bring this to council, but during discussion with Safety and Public Works Chair Mike O'Day, he wanted the park board to really actually take a look at this first. So we're right now designing for the South Brainerd reconstruction project, and part of that is the intersection of Tamarack and South 7th Street, north end of Hitchwain. So right now, you'll see in the packet, there's this old guardrail that's been there for many, many, many years. In review, it really does not serve a safety aspect. There's enough clear zone here based on the speed limit as well as the in-curb section that we really only need a clear zone of 2 feet behind the curb before we have to protect anything, and there's more than 2 feet along this entire length here. So the guardrail really doesn't necessarily have to be there, and judging by the condition, it really hasn't been used in many, many years either. So it would be our recommendation as part of that project, we would pull this guardrail. Now, understanding that there's kind of the aesthetic aspect of that too, if somebody wants to see something installed there, we could. My recommendation would not necessarily be put a guardrail there that doesn't look really good, but maybe put like a a black chain link fence, very similar to the ones we put on the trails by Norwood and 12th. Kind of that black, almost vinyl chain link, if you wanted to see something. But, and at the same time, we could also not put anything. It's really just a difference of cost. So it was recommended that kind of what does the park board see, and one of the other mentions would be like a half wall. If the park board wants to see like a half wall sitting there, it's really up to you guys if what you would like to see.
So this came from the city council. They were looking to remove it, and then they thought that since there's a park there, maybe the park board should look at it?
It was going to be my ask of the council to review this. And during discussions before it went to council, it was said, hey, bring it to park board first.
What, I just have to ask,
What's the road gonna do?
leaving it there, what's the problem with leaving it there?
Nothing. It just doesn't look very good.
Just doesn't, what?
It just doesn't look very good.
I like it, it's got character.
It serves a purpose though, so, I mean, if we put a fence there and someone runs into it, they're gonna go straight through the fence, right? And if we keep the guardrail, that will stop a vehicle from going down the hill and hitting the kids while they're sledding.
Potentially. Well, so
Yeah.
that guardrail is actually not in compliance with the current standards of guardrail. So when that gets replaced at some point, it wouldn't look just like that. It'd be at a different height. It'd actually be higher. But like I mentioned, it's been there for many, many years, and it's really not a high-risk intersection because you're not really coming at a high speed. Really, the southbound is the only one that has kind of unabated access to that corner. And since they're on the opposite side of the street, there's a lot of forgiveness there. So again, from an engineering standpoint, we don't feel like it's an over and above safety risk to remove it.
Just so everyone knows, when you're sledding here and you're trying to make the 10-person chain with the tubes, this is what you hang on to hold the whole group up the hill.
Makes sense.
I'd like to make a motion to leave the railing as is, and we'll deal with it down the road if we have to replace it.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think the sign for this park is sad at best. And I would like to remove the guardrail if it opens up the possibility of putting a sign in that follows our design standards.
Sign over here, though, right?
It's the sad little thing on top of no motor
We have
vehicles.
one over here, though,
But we have one on the other, by Willow Street, by Vine Street.
right here. This is the actual sign
Yeah, because that's kind of like the entrance over here.
down here.
Oh, it's just
Right
out
here.
of,
It's right there.
You could enter at either spot, but.
I don't think
This is the tubing location entrance.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second.
Just get it off.
I think that's a different,
Yeah, it's in
I
your.
think that's
yeah,
a whole different
yeah.
I got you.
item. To look at the sign and decide if we need a new sign or not, but, okay. A motion and second. Any further discussion? None being heard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hold same sign.
I,
Okay, motion carries.
Oh, are we done yet? All right, let's go wrap it up.
Okay,
Rushmeyer.
hey,
oh, yeah.
I was gonna say, let's put spray cans down there and let people spray the thing, but, okay, next line item is, public forum. Anybody on, Mr. Strong? Okay,
Oh,
all right. Let's move on. Board member reports, anybody?
Yes, I,
I'll go
You
first.
didn't have your hand up, Kevin did, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
fine, you're right,
burn.
I never.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's been an absolute pleasure serving with you, Mr. Boder. I understand this is your last meeting, and I just want to say that you've added a ton of color, and to our board, which I've appreciated.
Off color?
Many times off color, but that's still, it's the Tim Boder color, and I much appreciate that. So all the best. It's been fantastic serving with you, and people in the world don't realize enough what doing this, how unappreciated this type of work is. And I just want to say, I'm one of those people that appreciates people that show up and do this every day and bang their head against the wall half the time and get nowhere half the time. And it's small wins and a lot of losses and a lot of criticism, even if they are wins. So thank you for what you've done, and I wish you all the best, Tim, and it's been a pleasure, sir.
Well, and to reiterate that comment, I appreciate everyone else helping out. I went back as far as I could find, and I think it was November of 2011 when I started doing this. So that's a lot of time that was given to the city. A lot of cool projects have taken place. A lot of cool projects got voted out. But pretty fortunate to be involved with a lot of it, and pretty fortunate to be done with it as well.
Well, I just want to add, thanks for always saying what's on your mind. I just think that's hugely important. So thank you for.
My pleasure. Like I say, it was not always the most professional way to do things, but it was kind of the way I do things. So.
I was going to say thank you as well, Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We can all say our thank yous.
Yeah.
No, you definitely.
That's the best part. That's
I did. Oh, did you already?
right in the heart she hits me. That's good. So.
Yeah. But yes, thank you for always, being yourself. We'll definitely miss that.
I won't be watching online. Just to see how things go.
Come
You will.
on.
You lie. You will too.
If the lights are on the agenda, I bet you will listen in.
It's right there on YouTube.
Yeah, that'll definitely.
If the lights get in, we are going to officially name those the Tim Boder Memorial lights.
But not Memorial. Oh, 'cause
Memorial Park, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, he's not going anywhere. Yeah. Okay.
Any other?
Yeah, I'll just thank you, Tim, as well. I think the board has been successful in the short time I've been here because we all bring ourselves in our different perspectives, and I appreciate yours, especially as an as a hockey ref. You're seeing things that, we aren't seeing because you're out there getting yelled at for balls and strikes. So, yes, thank you for everything.
Glad to help. That's the best part. So now I gotta find something to do.
You'll find something.
Okay, with no life, I got a whole lot of no life going on.
That's not true.
I had a couple real quick things. Just thank you to Troy and your team for getting Gregory plowed for the caroling event on Saturday. It was a great time, and we were able to get to the center of the park, which was up in the air because it was still snowing. And just something for us to think about going forward. The heavy snow seems to bring broken glass out of the tree in the center of Gregory from those ill-fated Christmas lights. So maybe when we look at the capital budget, we need hours and hours of a scissor lift or something to get those godforsaken
We could get the
lights
people who put it up to get them back down. Who was that? I wonder who that was. Do you know who that was? I think it was the Northsiders. I'm not sure. They might be able to volunteer some time to take down their lights.
So they're breaking?
They
Glass?
they went up in the 90s, is what I've been told.
And
They're glass.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, it says raining. You'll
do
find.
they work?
No, no.
Oh,
They're
okay. I was
ripped
like,
and
I didn't
ripped
think we.
So you just
Okay.
find little puddles of broken glass.
That's terrible.
Sometimes the
Okay.
dogs find it. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah, that was all. Mostly thanks, Troy. And your guys.
Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to staff reports.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So you have it in your packet, kind of the rec and maintenance reports. Just to kind of summarize the rec report, and I know Katie can kind of expand on this if she wishes. So a handful of different comments in there. I think a few of the ones that were kind of highlighted were some of the lighting issues at the softball fields, like we've been discussing a lot lately, and for half of this year. Some of the other pieces were consistency and availability of umpiring, and timing and convenience of games, being able to keep them running efficiently. That was kind of general comments. I know there was a handful of other ones, trees, trimming those back. So again, I'll let Katie expand on that, but the other things, just kind of update, we got youth hockey, pond hockey, adult pond hockey coming up here soon. As of last week, we have the number of registered teams there. Obviously, we're hoping to get a few more in there before the deadline yet. Something coming up here that we wanted to discuss with the park board, and you'll see it here, but we'll bring a more formal item for you is Katie and I were having some discussions regarding a way to do some sort of an opening for the new park over there at Mississippi Landing, some sort of a special event, and begin the planning process for that. So again, we'll bring a more formal item to the park board to start that discussion of what that could look like if the park board is interested in hosting an event to do more of a ribbon cutting, something more ceremonial, and trying to get people out to that park to, hey, here's our new park, here's all the things that thing has, and trying to get people to be aware of it and all the programming that we can do there. So again, we'll just put it in your mind to start thinking of ideas and suggestions for that event and what that could look like. Right now we're just kind of eyeing June 3rd. We wanted to avoid the Memorial Day weekend, but we felt like June 3rd was late enough in the season to allow for all of the last little bits of construction stuff that we have to wrap up in the spring. So we thought June 3rd was kind of a nice date that doesn't, as of right now, we can't think of anything that conflicts with it. So that's kind of generally what we were thinking there. And then I know she mentioned in here some new programming with pickleball. Pickleball is the new hot activity that everybody's into. So is this something that we wanted to continue to explore as a new set of programming that the city would provide, is pickleball tournaments, teams, kind of programming in that way. Other than that, Katie, did Katie have anything to expand on some of that stuff?
Can you guys hear me at all?
We can.
Yep.
Nod if you can hear me. Great. If you just want to scroll back up, I just wanted to hint on a couple of things regarding the survey. Something in a future park board meeting, and maybe even this is the master planning for Memorial Park, but I know I have it highlighted in some just comments, but regarding those trees in between fields 1 and 2, I really would like to have a discussion around those. And James Kromvik, if you would like to also be in that discussion regarding those trees, that'd be great. But we're having some issues with them shading the field, the light that we basically lack right now. They're also shading the fields a little bit, and they're causing a lot of dead balls. So something that we really should look at, whether it's pruning, and if pruning them as much as they need to get pruned means they die, is that going to be an issue? If we just remove them and suggest a different alternate shade option with master planning, that's also something to consider. But I think that's something we should look at eventually, and I'm bringing it to your attention so that it's not a surprise when I do bring it up. And then scroll down a little bit. I just wanted to hint at the Mr. and Mrs. Softball. That's going over really, really well with the community and the softball. Scroll down even farther. Sorry, I don't know if it's being shown. So Riley Klein and Aaron TC, it's being received extremely well as far as like our social media. And I think it was a really smart move to do as a Parks and Rec organization, because it is showing, it's bringing the community together around a sport and really highlighting what we're looking for in the future of softball, and that's good sportsmanship. And hopefully we can continue that award as years go on. And then regarding the pickleball, that's more of just wanting to survey the public on what Brainerd would like, and then I would come back to you guys on what they respond as far as the pickleball. So that's my only comments. Did you guys have any follow-up or questions to me regarding my portion?
I have one, Katie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you look at other communities and see what they're doing with their pickleball, leagues
Yes, I can.
or
I can
whatever,
confirm.
and bring something to us on that? On what that looks like?
Yes, I can definitely do that. I spoke with a lot of people at the MRPA conference regarding pickleball leagues and it growing in the Twin Cities and what they do for that. It is fairly new to the Parks and Rec, but there are several communities that have started leagues and started doing tournaments. But I can do some research if it's mostly private or if the actual recreation entities are running them themselves.
I think that'd be very helpful. Thank you. Anyone else? No. Thank you, Katie.
Correct.
And just to expand a little bit on the maintenance side of it, so I know Troy's been awfully busy this last month between wrapping up the last of winterizing stuff and kind of moving into more winter prep, winter operations. I know he helped us out quite a bit with a lot of the lighting downtown, helped set up the nice tree lighting ceremony we had down here at City Hall. That went over really well. I know Troy checked over that tree at least a half dozen times to make sure it all lit this year. So it turned out really well, although it was incredibly cold that night. But no, it went really well. And downtown, I know he helped out with hanging a lot of the downtown decorations too. And those will be something that the city's going to have to continue to look at too. But no, their crews have been great to help out with a lot of those things. Again, now we're moving into a lot of winter operations. They did a lot of log splitting over at Lum for campgrounds. We had, unfortunately, an awful lot of logs to be able to split this year, but it did help with our stockpile. Now it's a lot of winter operations, and unfortunately, the last week, like we all experienced, it's been a lot of snow clearing, but to your point, we were able to get through and keep a lot of our parks opened up for the little bit of programming that we do have out there and get ourselves set up for flooding rinks. Hopefully we can get a couple weeks of good cold weather that we don't have a whole bunch of snow coming. Unfortunately, like the next day or two looks like we're going to have another handful of inches of snow, although it's going to be light and fluffy, but it doesn't serve very well for flooding rinks and making ice. So hopefully we'll luck out with the weather and we can set something up for rinks. But we're coming up on winter operations here really soon. I think we're still hoping for the 27th to open up the warming houses, but again, it's really weather dependent, and we're hoping to get lucky.
Thank you, Director Dean. Any other comments? We have a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Crambit.
Yeah, I do have one thing to add. So our department is working on an Emerald Ash Borer grant program. We've been working on that for a couple of years, taking inventory. So just wanted to let the park board know that probably in the next few months, we'll be bringing something to you guys as well. Specifically Kiwanis Park, it's almost all shaded by very nice mature ash trees. So that'll be kind of an important part of we're gonna be instituting essentially an emerald ash borer management policy. Certainly wanting to try to maybe preserve some of those nice ash trees in the event that this area does get infected by the emerald ash borer.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I just have one more quick piece from last night's council meeting. We did bring it up to the city council based on the discussion with the amphitheater discussion about the potential for alcohol in the parks, and we kind of briefly touched on it today. So the council essentially is open to the discussion based on what the park board would like to see for the potential sale or consumption of alcohol in parks, whether that's any and all or some form of restrictions. It's really up to what the park board wants to present to the city council, and they're open to considering it. They didn't say that they're going to approve it, but they said they would be open to considering it. So that'll probably be on the next park board agenda is discussion on at what level does the park board want to see alcohol allowed or for sale in parks.
Did you get a feeling of general consensus on?
From some, I think there's some openness to whatever the park board wants, if that's essentially full reign. I think there's a couple votes. I can't tell you exactly how many votes would be in that direction. I have heard that there are some no votes on pretty much any change from what it is today. But it really becomes what does the park board want to see, and we'll present that to council.
One in each hand, and we keep 15% for the parks.
For the lights.
I'd like to see.
All
right.
If
Do
we
we have
are
a
all
motion?
done, I would like to propose that we close this meeting, and I close my duty as a park board member. Former president twice, and longtime boring little fella, keeping this thing moving.
Well, I was
Thank you
hoping
all.
you would do that, so.
Thank you all and good luck. And to be honest, I mean, I started as a year and a half just to fill in for the last guy, Ron guy. I finished his contract, and then I got 2 more after that. But the last 4-ish years have been, holy cow, much better as far as things taken care of, things getting done the way they're supposed to be done. So well done to all of you as well. So nice job. Keep it going.
I think you have been a huge part of that as well, Tim. So are you making a motion to adjourn?
I am indeed.
I'll second that.
In a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Tim.